Ladies and gentlemen, WWL 870 AM, the premier automotive group, and Deanie's Seafood of Bucktown welcomes you to the Roast of Buddy D. Please welcome your host, WWL-TV sports director and play-by-play voice of Saints Radio, Jim Henderson.
Thank you very much. What a turnout tonight. Well, as you all know, we are gathered here tonight to salute true greatness. For it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who once said, "To be great is to be misunderstood." We haven't been able to understand Buddy Diliberto for 50 years. First of all, I'd like to thank UNO officials for making this cozy room available for us. When the people at WWL began planning this event, they said, "Where can we go? Where can we find a place that's big enough to hold all of Buddy's friends?" The Lakefront Arena was the answer. Next year, we intend to roast Buddy again and invite all his enemies. We hope you'll join us then in the Louisiana Superdome. All I can say is I'm just glad that there wasn't a UNO basketball game scheduled here for the same night, because we'd probably have 15 fewer seats to sit in. Turning on me early. Our first roaster tonight is a man of vision, a dreamer who won't be told no, who sees things not as they are, but as they could be. In 1970, he had a dream of creating a huge edifice where people from all over the world could come. But establishing the Buddy Diliberto School for Advanced Linguistics was too much even for him, so he gave up and turned his attention to something simpler and invented the Louisiana Superdome instead. That would be Mr. Dave Dixon, but first, this taped response.
Hey, buddy. Brian L.A. Walsh again, bud. You know, I've been thinking, the word roast. I can't believe that they used the word roast to call this affair. First off, you can't even say it correctly, and two, you can't spell it. Why don't they call it a hamburger or something like that, something where you know what's going on?
Brian L.A. Walsh, and without further ado, Mr. Dave Dixon.
All right. Well, I tell you, we're talking all about curses these days. The curse of the Bambino, the curse of the Billy Goat. Well, I'm going to tell you, right there is the curse of the Buddy D. And I'm going to explain that. Buddy Diliberto was an extremely talented young writer, and he emerged onto the Times-Picayune at a time, and during his boyhood days, real early boyhood days, Tulane had been a national power in football. So Buddy was a big Tulane guy, and he gets into the Picayune, and Tulane suddenly de-emphasizes football after winning 3 Southeastern Conference championships in a period of non-war years of about 10 years or so. So Tulane was a national power, but Buddy comes into the Picayune, and so Tulane virtually quits football. So Buddy, during the 55 years of following Tulane, Buddy has been right with them all the time, losing. So that's the part of the curse of Buddy D. But it goes on from there because obviously he became a huge Saints fan. And that was 37 years of losing, or at least not always losing, but of frustrations. And Buddy D was right there with them the whole time, putting that curse of the Buddy D on them. Anyway, finally, in great despair, Buddy decides, I think he decided this, that maybe he should, he's a great, always has been a wonderful Catholic, and he decided maybe he'd go back to being a daily communicant. And so now he's a daily communicant. And within a very brief period of time, down goes Notre Dame football. So that's my boy. I love him, but that's our curse of the Buddy D. Now, Buddy is a very, very resourceful person, though. And one night he calls me and he says, "Dave," he says, "let's you and I have dinner tonight after the Saints game." And he says, "I got to go out to Hooters or someplace out in the parish." And he said, "You'll be the, we'll have a little dinner." He says, "Could you pick me up and we'll use your car?" And I said, "Sure." So I drive into Hooters, and we'd had some problems with the traffic, and we were running very close to Buddy's airtime, and he was plenty nervous about it. And we drive around and around, and there are no parking places. But there are 3 or 4 handicap parking places. So Buddy says, take that handicap place right by the door. He said, it'll be no problem, I'll handle it all, and I'll tell you what to do. So I said, well, okay. And so we drive up, getting out of the car, Buddy says, now start limping all the way to the front door. And then the man limps all the way up to the microphone. He's just barely in time to take over. And he says, some squirrel molested us. That's why I'm limping. And I think that was the first time I heard him use the term squirrel. But since then, he's become a world champion. He uses squirrel about 25 or 30 times per broadcast. And that's my boy, Buddy D. Now, there's one other thing about Buddy. Oh yeah. Now, Buddy says to me, Dave, he says, the Saints have got the perfect coach coming in. It's Mike Ditka, and he's going to be so great, it will be like the second coming. Well, with the exception of Jim Mora, I was used to some very bad coaches with the Saints. And I always thought that maybe the worst was a guy who played a very good college football player named J.D. Roberts. And J.D. played at Oklahoma when young Meekum was there, and so they were friends or something, and so he hires J.D. to come in and be the head football coach of the Saints. Now, J.D. had been a coach for a year and a half, and his record with the semi-pro Richmond Roadrunners was 0-23. Mr. Meekum thought he was perfectly suited to be head coach of the Saints. So, all right. Now, so then, Buddy didn't tell me what he meant by the second coming of Mike Ditka. He said, the second coming, David, believe me, he can't miss it. It'll be as great as the second coming. What he really meant was the second coming of J.D. Roberts. So, one thing that sticks in my memory from the very earliest days, and when Buddy and I were good friends even back that early, and one night I'm at dinner with John Meekum, and he says, this was before the Saints had played a game or even had been officially named. And I wanted to name the team the Saints because of the great song, and it was so distinctive of New Orleans and so forth. And Meekum is trying to talk me out of it and says it might be considered sacrilegious or something. I said, that's sacrilegious? How can you think that? And just at that almost precise moment, the brand new Archbishop in town, as N. Charles Wicker would have said, but as the brand new Archbishop in town comes walking by our table, Archbishop Philip Hannon. And so I reached out my arm, and to my great embarrassment, I really stopped him. And so I apologized and said, Archbishop, let me ask you this question. I said, would the name Saints be all right for our football team? And he said, yes. He said, it would be a wonderful name. And he said, besides, I have a terrible premonition that over the years we're going to need all the help we can get. So there sits the curse of the Buddy D, and I love him, and he's a great, wonderful person, and that's what I have to say about my dear friend, and he is my dear friend.
I'm going to say something that I probably shouldn't say.
Because I'm pretty?
Kind of takes your breath away, doesn't it? Whew. Mike Ditka. I've already heard Mike Ditka's name used in connection with Buddy. Were you as surprised as I was when, the NFL hired Mike Ditka to be the spokesperson nationally for ED, erectile dysfunction? I mean, I was. For 3 years, he had no problem screwing the Saints. Throughout his career, Buddy Diliberto has been an inspiration to young sportscasters such as Vince Marinello, who said to themselves, Christ, if he can make it in this business, anybody can. Vince had the opportunity to work for his mentor early in Vince's career. He's been trying to live that down ever since, obviously without a whole lot of success. Vince has also spent a lot of time as a handicapper at the fairgrounds, offering tips. After one too many bad tips to the wrong guy, Vince woke up one morning with a horse's head in bed with him. That afternoon, Buddy bet on that horse to win the 7th race. Vince Marinello.
Thank you very much, Jim. I hadn't planned on starting off with Buddy's the horse racing, but since Jim brought it, first of all, let me say one thing, that Buddy and I worked together for 22 years, 3 different television stations, a whole bunch of years at Channel 8, a whole bunch of years plus at Channel 6, a couple of years at 38, and I'm proud to say that Buddy and I worked together for, 22 years, and we never had a crossword between us. That's a fact. Shows you how easy it is for me to get along with me. One thing about Buddy, I have to thank him because, first of all, Buddy gave me my opportunity to be in television in New Orleans, and I've always thanked him for it, and I thank him again. Without Buddy, I probably would have gotten to New Orleans. I was working in another market, but Buddy gave me my start here, along with my other buddy, Alec Gifford. So, Buddy, I want to thank you publicly for giving me the opportunity to start in New Orleans television. Well, everybody knows Buddy D likes horses. I like horses. There's no doubt about it. And from time to time, now, Buddy won't bet on racehorses until after the football season is over. Now, after the season is over, then he'll call the track where I work. I do the television with his son, Mike Diliberto, who's a terrific guy and a terrific handicapper. Mike was going real good one time. I mean, really good. He was betting on winner after winner after winner, and he was going so good. And Buddy called up one day, and he said, hey, you got something I can bet on? I'm coming out to the track. And Mike said, no, I don't think so. Well, the truth of the matter is we did have this horse that we were waiting to bet on that day. So when he hung up the phone, I said, what'd you tell Buddy? He said, man, I don't know. We're going so good. He said, I don't know. He said, I don't know about giving him to Buddy. I said, Mike, you can't do that. That's your father. He goes, yeah, man. He said, but I tell you, he said, I said, oh, go ahead. But call him back. Tell him this horse just came in. We just got the tip on him. So sure enough, Mikey D calls his dad up. He said, Dad, we just got a tip on this horse in the 6th race. He said, he'll run good from what we hear, et cetera, et cetera. So the race comes up. Now, if this horse wins, it means like 4,600 to Mikey D. Means like about 2,400 to me. Mike had bet some of those gimmick races, so it's coming back pretty good. He says, man, he said, this is the kid's tuition. He said, if we hit this lick, he said, boy, I hope this horse runs good. So Buddy had bet on the horse. He told Mike, he said, bet so much, whatever it was. He made the bet. Now, they turn for home, and this horse slips through on the rail, and I know Richie Pettibone knows what, he's a race enthusiast, as is Billy Kilmer. Horse slips through on the rail. Man, opens up full lengths. It's not a question whether the horse is going to win. It's just a question of how far he's going to win. So we counting the money, right? All of a sudden, the horse takes an unexplainable left turn, goes right through the fence, throws the jockey. He's disqualified. There goes all the tickets, all the money. Mike, who never uses a bad word, believe me, Mikey D never uses a bad word. He leaves that up to me when we bet on losers. He lets out a string. I was surprised. I just looked at him, and all of a sudden, to break the tension, he says, I guess I shouldn't have called Buddy. Well, there was another horse that Buddy liked one time. 1983, they had a horse called Swale, who won the Kentucky Derby. Alec Gifford and Buddy were anchoring the news at Channel 8. Channel 6, I'm sorry. So Alec says, Buddy, who you like in the Derby tomorrow? Buddy says, oh, I like some horse. I don't like Swale. He said, I don't like, he said, oh, everybody likes him. He's the favorite, but I don't like him. So Buddy picks another horse. Well, the next day they run the race, and the horse wins by 3-4 lengths very easily. Swale's the winner easily. So 2 weeks later, they run the Preakness. That's the second jewel of horse racing's Triple Crown. So Alec, again, he asked Buddy, he said, Buddy, who you like tomorrow? Buddy said, oh, I got to go with Swale. He said, he was very impressive in winning the Derby. Next day, the horse runs third. 3 weeks later, they have one more jewel to the Triple Crown, the Belmont. Alec, again, on Friday's show. Buddy, who you like in the Belmont? He goes, huh. He said, I don't want no Swale. He said, I didn't like the way he ran. I don't think he can go that far in a boxcar. He can't go 1.5 miles in a boxcar. So he picks another horse. They run a race the next day, Swale gallops. So now Buddy's 0 for 3 with this horse, right? On Wednesday, 4 days after the race, they go to the stall, and this horse is dead. Swale is dead. He drops dead. A 3-year-old drops dead. So, man, everybody's in shock. So we're around the newsroom, and I don't know how many of you remember Bob Krieger, the late Bob Krieger, who was a funny, funny guy. So, yes, indeed, good rider. I've always said that he and Jim Henderson were and along with Buddy D. Let me throw my buddy in, Buddy D. Those were the 3 best riders that I've ever been associated with, and excellent, excellent riders, no question about it. So anyway, somebody says, man, I wonder what happened to Swale. I said, I don't know. So Bob Krieger says, I know what happened. I said, what happened? He said, Buddy picked him to live. Let me tell you one thing. I don't regret 1 minute of working with Buddy. 22 years, I'm proud to say. Everything I learned about journalism, whatever amount it is, I learned from Buddy and also from Alec Gifford. I also learned what not to do in journalism. But Buddy's a terrific journalist, and working with him, it was never a dull moment. Never, ever a dull moment. We heard Dave Dixon talk about the John Meekum days. And so Buddy's off the team plane. Everybody's feeling sorry for Buddy. Ah, man, Buddy's off the plane. Buddy's off the plane. So me and the photographer by the name of Steve Peretti have to go to Buffalo to cover the Bills. It was a preseason game. It was a Saturday night. We got to fly commercial because Buddy's off the plane. So we go to a place called War Memorial Stadium. All right? Now we get to War Memorial Stadium. We do the interviews after the game, and it's getting dark, and we don't. So I asked somebody, I said, we need a cab to get back to the hotel. The guy said, man, pal, you might have a tough time catching a cab here. He said, but call this cab company. I called the cab company and said, I need a cab. The guy says, where are you, buddy? I said, War Memorial Stadium. He said, ain't no way we're coming to get you. I said, wait a minute, you don't understand. We're from New Orleans. We're covering the game. We've got to get back. Now they got like 2 lights lit at War Memorial Stadium. Everything else is in darkness. He said, I'm going to tell you right now. He said, they knock off the concession stands about 6 times during the game. He said, you think I'm going to get a cab driver to come down there and pick you guys up? So anyway, I said, mister, you don't understand. We have to get a cab. He said, I tell you what. I said, I'll throw $20 in over the cab, but whatever the amount is, to come get me. He said, make it 40. I'll see if I can get somebody. I said, you got a deal. So he puts me on hold, comes back. He says, look, a guy's going to come get you. When you see him coming, he's going to blink his lights twice. That means he's the driver. He said he's not stopping. He said, so be ready to get in the cab. Man, now you got to know Steve Peretti. Buddy, he gripes over, he would knock a glass of ice water in the desert, okay? He would complain it wasn't lemonade or something, but Jim knows him, and he's just a perpetual griper. And man, I got him on my nerves. He's complaining. I thought Buddy said this was going to be easy. I said, well, we're not dead yet anyway. So here comes the cab. We open up, the cab driver opens up the car door, the back door. He doesn't stop, and there we are throwing all this expensive gear in the back seat of the car. I guess Alec would have had a stroke if he knew all that expensive camera gear. We was just flipping it in there. Guy would not stop. We threw it in there. We had to run 15 miles an hour going down the street. That's the way they pick you up in Buffalo. We got back. Buddy said, how'd everything go? He said, it went fine. Buddy goes, oh, that's good. That's good. Then we go to San Francisco. Buddy gets back on the team plane. All of a sudden, we wrapping up practice at Vero Beach, and Rusty Kazmersky, who was the PR guy for the Saints, comes knocking on the door, and I happened to be in the same room with Peretti. We were going over something. He said, Vince, I got bad news. He said, you all can't ride the team plane to San Francisco next week. I said, what do you mean? He said, man, I'm just a messenger. You can't ride the team plane. So I call up Buddy. I said, Buddy, so I relay the news. Buddy goes, they what? They what? Those SOBs? They want to go to war? We'll go to war with them. We'll go to war. So for like 2-3 minutes, he's saying we're going to go to war with them. I hung up the phone and said, what did he say? He said, we're going to war. He said, what? We're going to war. So now, make a long story short, we go out to San Francisco. It's game day, 91 degrees, the hottest day of the year in San Francisco. We have nothing. All we have are credentials. The Saints conveniently told me that they forgot to give us a parking pass. So I take the rental car. I go to the media gate. The guy says, sorry, pal, no pass, can't get in. I said, look, all I want to do is have the photographer drop this equipment off. He says, no, can't do it. So we finally find a guard to let us in, drop the equipment off. I said, where can I park? He says something about some cove or something, about a mile from the stadium. Man, I said, okay. So I parked the car, walked back a mile in this blistering heat to get to the game. That was the easy part, because now coming back, we got like 100 pounds of equipment. I'm carrying the hernia bag. We called it a hernia bag because it had all the tapes in it, the batteries. Peretti's got all this, and we trudging about a mile to get to the back to the car. And Buddy, and it's hot. It's hot, hot, hot. And Peretti says, going to war? Is this what going to war is? I don't think we win in this battle. I said, I wonder what Buddy's doing right now. He said, I can tell you what he's doing right now. He's sitting on a couch watching those 2 late games. He and Peggy are having a martini or a cocktail, and that's what he's doing right now. But Buddy holds a distinction, albeit a dubious one, at Jesuit High School, which besides being a terrific school in academia, also has a great athletic program. Buddy played on a baseball team, and this honor belongs only to Buddy. He is the only player on Jesuit to play 4 years on the freshman team. The best one was when we had a celebrity Olympics, and I think Alec was in charge of the lineup, and he pencils Buddy in for the 10-speed bicycle race. I think it was Alec, and he's supposed to be Buddy's friend, but he pencils him in for the 10-speed. It was held at Pontchartrain Beach and on the Midway. Well, Buddy's riding the bike. The race starts, and he's riding the bike, and he's pumping his little heart out, and all of a sudden, he's getting close to the finish line. Buddy was not in front, by the way, but he was the last one coming in, and he's trying to put the brakes on by reversing the pedals, like we used to do in the old days. And we yelling, Buddy, the hand brakes, Buddy, the hand brakes. Too late, cracks into the wall. The bike goes one way, Buddy goes the other way. It's not funny, breaks his wrist, all right? So now we're trying to get him in the car to take him to the hospital, and Alec, who's in a hurry to get him there, shoves him in the car, closes the door, and slams it on his good hand. Now Buddy's got a broken wrist and damaged fingers. But you know what? He never missed a day of work. Working with Buddy has been an experience for me, one that I thoroughly enjoyed. He'll always be a friend. His family's a friend of mine, all of them. And as I said, whatever I accomplish, whatever journalistic ability I have, I owe it to Buddy with a big boost from Alec Gifford, because Alec is the one who gave me a shot in television when nobody else would, because, heck, I was about 28 years old and I had no journalistic experience, no work for no newspapers or anything like that. So I want to thank Alec too. But Buddy D will always be a friend of mine, and I will always, a lot of people sometimes take shots at him, but I will always defend him because he's my friend. He gave me the chance I needed, and Buddy, on behalf, from the bottom of my heart, I wish you continued success and a very happy life, and you too, Peggy.
I will say this, I don't believe that I would have had the opportunity to go into television had not Hap Brody did it before me. Because I think that what was shown is that somebody that's had the expertise as far as the newspaper columnist is concerned and grew that reputation over a number of years, when he finally went into television, he certainly didn't have good diction and things like that.
Pete, Finney, and Buddy first became friends as reporters at rival newspapers. Buddy worked at the Times-Picayune. Pete worked at the States Item. The States Item isn't in business any longer, is it, Pete? What does that tell you? Together, they found they really loved covering the big fights. The first one they covered together was David and Goliath. Buddy picked Goliath. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pete Finney.
God, what a night. I can't believe this. This is, I got just a few quick stories on this guy. Buddy the chauffeur, okay. We're driving to New York for Mantle Maris hitting home runs. And we get stopped for, he's driving. We get stopped for speeding in Virginia, speed trap. Cop pulls us over and takes us to a service station. And the cop says, go in the back room. Buddy, me, and Lou Boda, who was the sports director of WWL. So we're sitting in the back room, which we find out is the courthouse. The guy who was pumping gas shows up in black robes. He's the judge. And Buddy says, I think we're in trouble. Well, to make a long story short, what is your name? And he says, Bernard S. Diliberto. And the guy says, you're in Virginia. He says, we don't take initials. What does the S stand for? And Buddy refused to say. And the guy said, what does the S stand for? Well, anyhow, Buddy had to say, Saverio. Whereupon, Lou Boda starts laughing. So they fined him $25. And he had to pay a $50 fine. But Lou Boda said it was worth it to find out what his middle name was. Now here's a quick one on Buddy the handicapper. Vince Gibson's coaching Tulane. Tulane is going to play SMU. SMU's got Eric Dixon, a hell of a team. Vince Gibson convinced Buddy that Tulane was a good bet. Tulane was like an 18-point underdog. So Buddy calls the goal sheet, his Bible, and he sells the goal sheet on Tulane. Tulane in 18 points. The goal sheet made Tulane the best bet of the week. So I watched the game with Buddy at his apartment, and it was right after he mentioned Buddy had a broken arm. He had run into the wall, He's got a broken arm for the celebrity bike race, whatever it was, at Pontchartrain Beach. Well, I'm watching the game. In the first quarter, Eric Dickerson, it's like 28-0. And they just killed Tulane. And so on Monday, Buddy calls the goal sheet to apologize. And the guy at the goal sheet says, Buddy, please don't ever call me again. So then, okay, there came the night. It was a 1-15 season. And in the middle of the 1-15 season, Buddy asked me to go on his TV show. And Buddy says, I have a surprise tonight. I didn't know what he was talking about. So in the middle of the show, he's sitting on a bag. And he gets the bag out. And he puts the bag, he says, I'm going to put the bag on until the Saints win a game. I'm going to put this bag on my head. And for the second half of the show, he had the bag on his head. So can you imagine trying to understand Diliberto with a bag on his head? And I guess the last story, well, it's a classic, and it's a true story. We're coming back from Baton Rouge, and Buddy said, you drive, I'm going to get in the back, and I'm going to handicap the first two races at the fairgrounds. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden, this limousine pulls alongside of us. It's Earl Long. He's the governor of Louisiana. This is back in, I don't know, when, I guess in the 60s. And Buddy sees him. Buddy puts the window down. Earl Long puts the window down. And they start talking about the first. Earl Long is handicapping a daily double, and Buddy's handicapping a daily double. And for 5 miles, I'm driving, and Buddy and Earl Long are talking about the damn first two races. So, we drive off, and Buddy said, boy, he says, I really would love, my ambition is to be the governor of Louisiana. I said, why are you talking? He says, Earl Long, Buddy, he says, when he bets and loses, the fairgrounds picks it up. When he bets and wins, he wins. So that's my man, and this is Bernard, and I love him. He's a great guy. That's it.
It was so bad that me, Buddy D, a sports junkie, can tell you with a straight face that watching the governor's race unfold last night was much more entertaining and exciting than watching the Saints this afternoon.
That's when you were fat and happy, huh? To work with Buddy on a daily basis and to see the private man behind the public image is to marvel at a man whose obvious personal peccadillos have not only failed to get him fired from a job he's totally unqualified to do, but have actually enhanced his stature among the lunatic fringe who continue to support him. Sort of like being the press secretary for Bill Clinton. Without further ado, here's Kenny Wilkerson.
Making notes. He makes a lot of notes, constantly. Nobody reads between the lines better on any story, on anything that's going on, than Buddy. A lot of people think that he kind of talks like he's reading between the lines, but he definitely knows what he's looking at, and he is truly the best that this city has ever brought out. You know, a lot of people called me and they said, we need some ideas, need some different things that's happened with Buddy to talk about tonight. And, you know, you go back, you start thinking about everything over the years, and you don't have to do that. You just have to listen to him for a night or two, and that's all you need. That's all the material you'll come up with. Just the other day at the game, he paused 10 seconds for station identification. Yep. He comes up with these analogies of things, and he compares all these different things. Mike Ditka's first year, about 4, 6, maybe not even mid-season, but the rumor was out that Mike was thinking about stepping down. He had probably made a mistake. Buddy, of course, at that time, nobody knew what was to come over the next couple of years. Everybody still thought, and Buddy still thought that Mike was going to do okay. So he comes on and he says, you know, the Dome, it's like a haunted house. I mean, it's over the years, it's horrible. It's a haunted house with now this beautiful fountain in it. And if you take away the fountain, nobody wants to go to the haunted house. I call, what is he talking? People in the studio, I said, I don't know, just wave and smile. It's okay. It's okay. You call him, and if he's not at his desk, he's the only, I mean, it's unbelievable that you would get a voicemail from him, that he even figured out how to put it onto his phone and not have somebody else do it. But you call and he doesn't answer, and the voicemail comes on and says, this is Buddy Diliberto. Please leave your name and number, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And please state your name clearly. Just got to do it. Over the years, a lot of people came along, and you know, you talking about this roast and all the old Dean Martin roasts, and Red Buttons used to talk about all the people that never got a dinner and never got a roast. And the list of names and the list of things that he's done, I've been putting together things for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you had to throw it all out. I mean, you have to, you know, there's just too much. You could go on forever and ever. But there are some select people out there that Buddy had a lot of fun with and probably should have had a dinner with them, like Ron Swoboda over the years. Ron Swoboda, never, you know. Tyle Curley, who used to play for the Saints, never got a dinner. Chris Cannoli, never got a dinner. Saints general manager Misty Loomis, no. Steak Snabler, never got anything. Scoot in the Morning, Buddy's first NFL analyst, never got anything. The band, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Nothing. One of our counterparts in crime is here tonight, Hokey Gaijon, or as Buddy would say sometimes, Koki Gaijon, Hokey Saigon, Toki Gaijon, and of course the best was when he came to us live in Thibodaux and said, let's go back down to Thibodaux, where Kenny Wilker and Honky Gaijon are standing by. Truly honored. Great working with you. 11 years, Vince, 22 years. You said you never had a crossword for 22 years. 22 minutes we were, getting into it, but he's taught me more than anybody could ever possibly teach me. And like I said before, he is truly the best, and he knows what's going on out there, and he reads between the lines better than anybody. When you tell him different things, I'll come in all the time and tell him stuff that's happening out at Saints Camp, and he can figure it all out and guide you in many, many ways. So I know that's why Vince had the things that he had to say, and everybody else will have wonderful things to say about him, because he truly is the best. I'm very honored to be part of this and be a friend of Buddy Diliberto. Thank you.
We're going to get some input from LSU, Tulane, and UNO on the subject. Joining us now is Dan Radakovic. Is that right? Dan Radakovic, the LSU Senior Associate Athletic Director. Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thanks, buddy. I bet you your name was never butchered like that.
No, that's why I changed it to Buddy D. Because a few times I was butchering my own name.
Because I think talent wins games, but I think teams win championships.
Hall of Famer Hank Stram. Alec Gifford and Buddy worked together at Channel 8, WVUE, from 1967 through 1980. Historians at Channel 8 refer to that time as the golden era of New Orleans television. The golden era for Channel 4, Channel 6, and Channel 26. Together, Buddy and Alec reported scandals, conspiracies, and national disasters of cataclysmic proportions, some of which actually happened. Mr. Alec Gifford.
Thank you, James. I bet you all didn't know that Buddy Diliberto was a war hero. During the Korean War, Buddy was the information officer over in Korea for some group, and his job was to take visiting newsmen who came there out to the front to get some good pictures of guns going off, cannons firing back and forth. So Buddy said, sure, there's Lou Shafi, the guy from ABC. So they get out there, and this gun is going off, and before they get their camera set up, the gun stopped shooting. And the guy says, hey, what happened, Buddy? He says, well, that was bed check Charlie. At a certain time, they stopped shooting, we stopped shooting. And he said, well, can't you get them to shoot again? And Buddy says, yeah, I can get them to shoot again. He says, tell you what, he says, you fire your gun and watch what happens. So they set up and they fire into this hill across the way, and that broke the rules. Those little Koreans over there said, we're going to fire back. So they did. They shot back, and a shell went off right next to Buddy, wounded him in the leg. He got the $1 million wound, back to the United States, and spent the rest of the war in bed. I tell you, Buddy's a war hero. I guess the story I really wanted to tell you folks is a legend at WVUE about the telephone. Buddy was always on the telephone. About the day a phone call came in from someone who said, I'd like to talk about Buddy Diliberto, please. What? I'd like to speak about Buddy Diliberto, please. Okay, he's not in right now. Can you give him a message? Says, yeah, I can give him a message. Said, what's the message? Tell him his speech teacher called. And I made the comment that Buddy Diliberto is the only person I know in the television business who is out of lip sync when he's live. That's almost, I remember the day that Buddy Diliberto decided that the only place to really do his his sportscast, because the Saints were doing so poorly, was to do his broadcast from in front of the Lamano Pano Fallow Funeral Home. Remember that day, buddy? That was a good sportscast. Buddy, good luck to you, fella. What you gonna say about me, buddy? he says he'll think of something.
The Purdue team is more or less they kind of perimeter oriented. The Purdue team is more or less they kind of perimeter oriented.
Buddy, how you doing? This is Dante Stallworth, that is, not Stall Pepper.
Oh, Dante Stallpepper. Richie Pettibone and Buddy first met at Jesuit High School and found they had something in common. It took both of them 6 years to get out of the 7th grade. They also found that they each had a love for sports and really wagering on sporting events. Together, they've backed more losers than Ray Nagin. Mr. Richie Pettibone.
You know, it's very true that Buddy and I go way back. As a matter of fact, I feel like I've known Buddy all my life. Our parents worked together at the Times-Picayune, and as a matter of fact, Buddy's dad was my godfather. So you know how far we go back. It's been a long ride, and I can say it's really been very rewarding for me. As has been pointed out, Buddy started as a reporter for the Times-Picayune, then he moved into TV, and then he moved into talk radio. In TV, Buddy was really known for two things, as I can remember. Number one, getting fired every time the Super Bowl was in New Orleans. And number two, getting barred for life plus 10 years from the Saints charter flight, Well, the reason he got barred from the charter flights was he tried to explain to the fans exactly how bad an owner John Meekum was. Well, after Meekum sold the team to Tom Benson, Buddy got a parole, and they let him go back on the plane. And one day he's hurrying to make the plane on a Saturday. He's listening to one game on the radio, got another one on TV. TV started to scramble. He reaches down to fix the TV, goes through a red light, bam, smashes in the car. Luckily, nobody was hurt in either car. When Buddy was asked, you know, exactly what happened on this thing, he said he just got distracted. And, you know, as we say, luckily nobody was hurt. And they say hindsight is 20/20. And I'm sure if John Meekum had known of the distraction problems that Buddy had, he never would have bought him from the plane in the first place. You know, to say that Buddy likes to gamble is really an understatement. You know, back in the days before simulcasting, we would go out to South Lake Tahoe, visit a good friend of mine, Russ McClendon, and we would go to the race book at 9 o'clock, start betting the New York tracks, and we'd bet all day. We'd go right through the day, right through Santa Anita. And Russ would make it a habit. He'd come by in the afternoon just to see how things were going for us. And one day he comes by and he asks Buddy, who's busy studying the form, he says, Buddy, he says, do you like abalone? Buddy says, is he at Santa Anita? And who's riding him? Had no idea he was talking about dinner that night. Also in the afternoons at Tahoe, Buddy would take a shot now and then on baseball games. So one day he comes up with the Boston Red Sox and the Cincinnati Reds. You know, another thing that I forgot to mention is that Buddy goes to church every day. I didn't know that at the time, but he goes to Mass every day. And I said, you know, that's pretty nice. He's very good going to church every day. So this long shot parlay, the Red Sox and the Reds, they both win. And I questioned him. I said, Buddy, how in the hell did you pick the Red Sox and Cincinnati? He said, well, today at church, they had red banners draped over the altar. Right away, he said, I knew it was the Red Sox and the Reds. You know, who's to knock his system as long as it pays off, you know? Back in 1950, Notre Dame came to town to play Tulane. And let me say this, that was a different era for both schools. Notre Dame was coming off, they'd just gotten beat the week before by Purdue to snap a 47-game win streak. And Tulane was really a powerhouse in the Southeast Conference at the time, a very, very good football team. Well, Buddy makes a bet on the game. He bet that my brother John would score more points than the whole Tulane team. A lot of people thought this was very strange since my brother played safety. But as the game turned out, Notre Dame won 13-9, and John did get a touchdown. So he lose 9-6. When this was pointed out to him, he said, this was, you know, Buddy, you really made a stupid bet. He said, I know. He said, but the odds were so good. He says, I just couldn't turn it down. The thing that I think that makes Buddy so successful in a talk radio, I think he really has hit the vein of New Orleanians. I think the thing that all Orleanians have, number one, they're terrible drivers, they love to gamble, and they love sports. I'm going to give you an example of his loving sports. When his brother Joe got married a while back, Buddy's in the wedding party, and everything was okay early on, but then they found out that the wedding was scheduled on the same day as the Tulane-LSU game. Now, back in those days, both teams in the SEC and both very competitive, and it was really a big game. So Buddy's up in arms. He said he knew the marriage was doomed. Anybody who would schedule a wedding on the day of the Tulane-LSU game really had no chance. And it just so happened that same Saturday, Auburn and Alabama, both undefeated, were playing and on TV. Now, Buddy, being the sportsman that he is, couldn't blame Joe for that because he says they had no way of knowing early in the year that they'd both be undefeated. But after much haggling, the way they resolved this problem is that Buddy was allowed to take a TV on the altar if he promised to keep the sound off. So that's kind of the synopsis on Buddy, and I think that personality is the thing that makes him so popular in the city of New Orleans. And there's only one thing I'd like to say, Buddy, that if the Saints ever invite you back on the plane, refuse, because we'd like to keep you around for a while.
The Saints have their number one pick. We've got ours. Buddy D, weekdays at 5, right here on the Big 870, WWL 870 AM.
Well, if you know Billy Kilmer's history, you know that it is an absolute miracle that he was able to play quarterback in the NFL. How anyone could function with that much absolute in him is a miracle. And probably explains why most of his passes looked the way they did. Billy Kilmer left the Saints huddle in 1970. When Bobby Hebert first ducked his head in the Saints huddle in 1985, he said you could still smell the fumes. Billy Kilmer.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I remember those days. I always told people, you know, you go to New Orleans, you got to survive Bourbon Street, and I did. You know, Buddy and I go back a long way. You remember 1967, the original year the Saints started, and I was one of 3 quarterbacks trying to make the team. And, you know, back in 1967, I caught him and John Meekin hugging and holding hands. I thought they were kissing on the lips in those days. Oh, yeah, they were buddies. Nobody ever remembers those days. I do. Also, you know, you talk about Buddy's little speech problem sometimes, right? Well, how about in 1985? The Super Bowl, right? He breaks a big story, and he was good at breaking stories. He broke, you know, a lot of, you know, exclusive stories, this and that. And he got an exclusive that Jim McMahon made a statement about the ladies of New Orleans. You know, they were kind of between cows and buffaloes. And he broke that story, right? And now the Bears get all up in arms, and McMahon, he's all pissed off and everything, and they're going to sue Buddy, right? They're going to sue him. And so the general manager at the time, Channel 8, I guess, he said, I reviewed the tapes of what he said, and we still can't understand him. Well, I'll tell you what, you know, I played on those early Saints teams, and Buddy was very kind to me. That's why me and Bobby Hebert, of all the quarterbacks that ever played here with the Saints, that's why we're here. Because none of the other guys would show up. Buddy and I go back a long way, and with Richie Pettibone, and, you know, he gave me a few horses. They're still running. But he's always been an inspiration to this town. And, you know, Richie just made a statement, you know, he's a sports fanatic. He's a true Louisianan. And you know what I call him? He's the second coming of Hap Glotty. Thank you very much.
Hey, buddy. Brian Alley Walsh here. I've covered the Saints for 17 years, since 1987, and I feel your pain. However, after all these years I've known you, I still can't understand half the things you're saying. I don't understand you. And finally, there's 2 things in this sports world that I know. Ron Swoboda trapped that ball, and you didn't receive a Purple Heart in the Korean War. However, after covering the Saints for all these years, you deserve a Purple Heart. Have a good one, big guy.
Well, Billy talked about the Saints quarterbacks being here tonight. There was one more who wanted to be, and that's Archie Manning, until he found out that he wouldn't get a free sport coat from Joe Gemelli's for being here after all. So he decided to do what he usually does on Thursday nights, stay home, get all liquored up, and count Peyton's money. Actually, though, Archie couldn't be here tonight because he's in Oxford, Mississippi, counting the money Eli's going to make. But he sent this heartfelt message.
I really regret that I'm out of town and I cannot be there tonight. I did want to tell one Buddy story. It was back in my first couple of years with the Saints, and of course Buddy was doing TV, and there was some trade rumors circulating. It was our day off. So Buddy called and said he'd like to do a quick little interview with me, and I said, well, Buddy, Cooper was a little boy, and I said, I'm babysitting, and I really can't come down to the station. He said, no problem. My wife and I are going to a ball. We'll stop, I'll get a cameraman, we'll stop by. So Buddy stops by. He's all dressed up in a tuxedo. His wife at the time had on this long dress, had feathers here everywhere. So we did a little quick interview, and his wife kind of kept Cooper while we did it. They left to go to the ball, and I went back in there to check on Cooper. And I always wondered what her dress was really like when she got to the ball, because Cooper had 2 handfuls of feathers. And I'm not sure how that dress looked after that. Buddy, I'm sorry, we really never got to make many trips together. You know, when I came to the Saints in 1971, Buddy had been kicked off the plane. John Meekum had kicked him off the plane because I guess he was kind of putting the team down a little bit. And so, but, you know, John was a pretty nice guy. And a few years later in the offseason, he said, you know, Buddy, they were together somewhere. He said, you know, Buddy, why don't you come back on the plane? So Buddy said, all right. So Buddy gets back on the plane. We take our first road trip that year. Buddy's on the plane. We get killed by somebody. Buddy comes back, blasts the Saints. Meekum kicks him off the plane again. So all my years here, we just got to make one road trip together. But Buddy, you've been a good friend. We did Monday nights, I think, for a year or 2 over at Casino Magic. Had a lot of fun with that. But we've had a lot of fun. You've been a good friend. It's a great night for you, a wonderful cause. I'm sorry I can't be there, but congratulations, buddy.
You must be doing a pretty hell of a good job. You must be doing a pretty hell of a good job.
Better bring out the straitjackets. We got a full moon tonight.
Makes my underwear ride up in the middle of my back. Whew. You know, it's always been a riddle, hasn't it? Do great coaches make great players, or do great players make great coaches? All I know is this: Bobby Hebert made Carl Smith what he is today. Which is virtually unemployable in our society as we know it. Bobby Hebert.
Jim, Carl is still coaching. He's actually coaching the Browns, but they can't decide on what quarterback they want to play, so I don't know how that's working out. You know, it's really hard for me to say anything bad about Buddy. I don't know if he always looked at himself as kind of like the outcast, or, you know, the social reject, and, you know, myself being from the country, and, you know, maybe city people thinking they're better than you. I think Buddy always kind of took up for me, so him and I go way back, and always have a part of Buddy in me that that's kind of expressed what I'm doing now. I kind of tell people, say, well, what are you doing back in Atlanta right now? I said, well, I'm kind of the Buddy D of the Falcons. You know, I do the post game. I said, you know, kind of, you know, halves point after. So, you know, one thing about Buddy, a lot of people didn't agree with it, and sometimes you want to be politically correct, but Buddy told it like it was, and that's what I'm trying to do in Atlanta. Some people like that, or some people don't. But if you're passionate about something, people respect that and appreciate that. And that's one thing. Buddy was always passionate, even though, you know, maybe you couldn't understand him, like people in Atlanta can't understand me. So, but the only thing is, I'm glad they have a few New Yorkers in Atlanta, because, you know, they think I'm from Brooklyn, or, you know, so that helps out. They don't have, you know, that Southern drawl and stuff. But, you know, when I first met Buddy, you know, the new players come in, you know, you're the team leader, so you're talking with them and, you know, communicating, and you go, they go, what's up with this Buddy Diliberto guy? Did he have a stroke or something? He's like, and I'm like, no, he just kind of has a hard times, you know, I'm trying to defend him. I said, no, he just has a hard time, like, with his W's and stuff. I said, you know, I said, he's kind of like it would be like, I guess, you know, New Orleans, where you at, kind of a New Orleans male version of Barbara Walters or something. So I said, you know, you just give him a chance. I said, you don't want to get him on your bad side, though, because I said he'll take you to a cleanest, and a lot of people, you know, will believe in him. I mean, come on, he's like, you know, Buddy's words sometimes. It's like, you know, the Bible in New Orleans. So as far as football, his opinion, you know, once you call the squirrel, I mean, you're a squirrel for life. I mean, there's no getting around that. And as far as, you know, Buddy D wearing a dress, what a great picture that would be in. It's almost like if the Saints win the Super Bowl, they got to get to the Super Bowl or win, buddy. They got to win, right? Well, just getting there. It's like, I'm almost like with Buddy. I think, wouldn't that be a great picture? Buddy Diliberto and the Cajun cannon in a dress, if the Saints get to the Super Bowl. I said, I think we can get a little TV time on that. But the thing is, what I never understood about, you know, Buddy, look at a number of things. You know, I played on 4 different teams. How can you get, you know, kicked off for life on a plane? I mean, you talk to different reporters, you know, whether it's newspaper or, you know, news media, that just doesn't happen. I mean, that's like, I mean, that's just unbelievable. Go, no way. I said, no, for life, it's not like 1 year. No, it's like, you know, it's like they don't want him around because, you know, Mr. Meekum probably thought he would maybe one day just go crazy and kill him or something. So he's like, I can't have him around. But, you know, I was talking with Coach Mora, you know, really Buddy D and I, you know, I had problems, I said, with Mr. Finks. You know, I had a few problems with Peter Finney because he was also on Mr. Finks' side. You know, but that's one thing with Buddy D. I wouldn't talk, that whole contract problems, 99, I wouldn't talk to nobody. They had all CBS, they don't want to come to my house. But I let Buddy D come to my house and talk, because I looked at him and, well, here, he's going to talk for the common people, you know, the peasants, you know, the masses. I said, the people who can relate, not all these aristocrats, the elitists. You know, I want Buddy D there, because I know Buddy D is going to tell it like it is. You know, some people agree or disagree with that, but then Coach Mora, you know, he looked at Buddy D and goes, man, I'll talk to other reporters, but talk to Buddy D. God, it's like, you know, ready to do anything else in the world. So I was just with Coach Mora. We had an NFL alumni thing in Portland, Oregon with Stan Brock, so we were all getting together, and Coach Mora's like, can you believe that, you know, Buddy D invited me? I said, Coach Mora means deep down he must really appreciate and like you, but here's your chance to get him back. I said, after all them years where you really wanted to kick his ass, you know, basically, you know. You know, instead of just, you know, saying a few verbal things, really getting them in a headlock and whipping them. But so I don't be too long-winded, because I know my wife, you know, she knows when you get a Cajun talking, you know, it's kind of, but I told a story last night that I really appreciate, you know, one of the main reasons why, you know, I got with the Saints was because Governor Edwards. I mean, I was going to be a Seattle Seahawks, you know, Governor Edwards, you know, he told me, you know, well, I'm going to tell you, I got to tell the story. It's nothing to do with you, buddy, but I'm going to tell it anyway. But no, it was amazing. Here, I'm ready to sign with the Seahawks. Teresa's by the phone. The media's calling. You know, she goes, stay by the phone. Governor Edwards going to call. I go, what? How you supposed to say, like, Mr. Edwards, you know, Governor Edwards, how you address him? You know, to show you only in Louisiana. He calls up, and his secretary's there. He gets on the phone, and I say, hello. He goes, hey, coon ass, what you doing? So I knew right then, I said, the ice was broken. And he said, listen, there's no freaking Cajuns in Seattle. You need to come down to New Orleans. Mr. Benson's keeping the team here. So that's why I got to give, hey, I love Governor Edwards. I don't know who wants to pardon him or not pardon him, but I'm all for it. So, but the last thing I like to say is that, and I can't pronounce this, so I'm not even going to try. I think Jim can help me or something. But we got this award. If you got player of the game, and I said, why couldn't it be some easy, like, jewelry company or something? He would say, like, Long Nile, Whit Nile, whatever, watch. I mean, could you tell me, could you come up, Jim, and tell me what is the, how you, I still don't know how to pronounce that.
I think it's supposed to be Longine Whitnawa.
Yeah, that was like, yeah, and here's Buddy saying it, I'm like, well, I said, well, you know, and I didn't want to, like, repeat and thank the company, because I couldn't say it either. So, but I was just so happy. I go, what in the world? I go, Buddy has a hard time with that, but so do I. And again, thanks for having me here tonight, and Buddy D's the greatest. All right, thank you.
You know, I was thinking as I looked over this esteemed dais as the evening wears on, we have so much to thank Dave Dixon for. I mean, not only did Dave Dixon invent the Superdome, he invented the USFL. If he didn't invent the USFL, maybe Bobby Hebert and Jim Mora wouldn't have had pro careers. If they hadn't had pro careers, Bobby Hebert and Jim Mora would never have quarterbacked and coached the New Orleans Saints. And where would we have been? Probably in 3 or 4 Super Bowls, but there's nothing we can do about that now. It's no secret that Buddy Diliberto was a frequent and unrelenting critic of Jim Mora when he was here. But Jim, the classy guy that he is, who would never respond to his critics, excuse me, always took the high road, suffering in silence, secure in the belief that Buddy would know a great coach from a terrible one. Jim Mora left the Saints in 1996. In 1997, Mike Ditka proved his point. The winningest coach in New Orleans Saints history, admittedly, that's not saying much, Jim Mora.
Thanks, Jim. You know, Bobby said that he'd have a hard time finding something bad to say about Buddy. I find it very easy. And Billy, Buddy wasn't kind to me, but I showed up. And I'm going to tell you right now, Buddy, Kenny said that we were all going to say wonderful things about you. I'm not going to. Okay? I'm not going to. You know, when Stacy Cordes from WWL called a couple of months ago and said, we want you to come back here and take part in a roast for Buddy Diliberto, I said, oh, you know, okay, what do you want me to do? She says, well, we want you to be one of the roasters. And I said, well, who picked me? She said, Buddy did. I looked at my calendar to make sure it wasn't April 1st. But the only thing that really ticks me off is this. I get a few minutes up here to rip this guy, and he ripped me for 11 years, you know? One thing I've always admired about Buddy is his ability to evaluate talent and judge talent. Especially coaching talent. You know, my last 2 or 3 years here, he wanted me out in the worst way. And then when I read where Ditka was coming in, and Buddy was all fired up about Ditka, 3 years, 15 wins, 33 losses, best record 6-10. Now, that's a great evaluator of talent, isn't it? The off season before my last season, I'd been here 10 years, and I always had a great relationship with the media, knew how to handle them and all. But Tom Benson decided it was time for me and some of the coaches and some of the people in the organization to take a little class with a media person to learn how to better deal with the media. So we took a 2-day course over there at the facility, and we had a press conference shortly after that about something. I don't know what it was, but Buddy asked me a question. And after taking this class, of course, I was standing up nice and straight, and I answered the question as best I could. And I remember Buddy made the comment, he said, I'll be damned, Coach Mora finally answered the question. And Buddy, the reason it took me so damn long, because it took me that long to understand what the hell you were asking me. My first year here, our first round draft pick, our first pick was a fellow by the name of Jim Dombrowski. And we had when we, right the day after the draft, after we pick our #1 pick, we always bring the #1 pick in. We brought Jim in, and his agent came in with him, and we were having a press conference introducing our #1 pick, Jim Dombrowski. And that year in the draft, there was another player with a similar name who was a wrestler, had been a wrestler in college. So we got Jim up there, and his agent, myself, Jim Finks, and Buddy raises his hand. He says, Jim, he said, tell me about your wrestling career. And Jim said, I'm sorry, I didn't wrestle. Well, yeah, you did. You were a wrestler in college, and sounded like Elmer Fudd, you know. But and his agent said, hey, Jim wasn't a wrestler. You know, I know you were a wrestler. Tell me about your wrestling career. Well, I know for the rest of Jim's career, Buddy called him Jim Jumbrowski for some reason. You know, in recent years, I've had an opportunity since I left the Saints to be on Buddy's show by phone. And a couple of times I've been back here in New Orleans, and he always wanted to be on the show, and I cordially accepted. And he would ask me sometimes about, you know, what I thought of players and people that were currently in the league or had been in the league. And he asked me about that middle linebacker for the Bears, you know, Brian Allracker. And our ex-fullback who's on the radio for the Saints, Koki Saigon. He asked me if I ever coached Steak Nabler. No. He said, what do you think of that coach over at LSU? Sick Nabin. And one time he asked me about one of our players, this is when I was coaching here, about his injury. He said, tell me about his torn lead ligament. You know, Buddy was always on my offensive coordinator, as a lot of people were, Carl Smith, and he was mentioned earlier. And I'm sure that Buddy felt like he could do a better job calling plays than Carl could have. Now, can you imagine Buddy Diliberto calling a play in to Bobby Hebert, and you know what the hell it would have sounded like by the time it got to our players? Man, we would have really been screwed up. And of course, Buddy would have made Bobby sound like Richard Burton. You know, there's been a lot of talk about Buddy betting on horses. Buddy also likes dogs, and he's got a couple of dogs. Of course, I've always wondered why anybody would listen to Buddy. His dogs don't even listen to him. They have about as much respect for him as most of the football coaches I know do. One day, one of his dogs bit him on the leg. He called up the doctor, and he says, hey, Doc, my dog bit me on the leg. The doctor said, well, did you put anything on it? He says, no, he liked it just the way it was. And you know, for a long time, Buddy didn't even know what kind of dogs he had. And one day, one of the dogs ate a bunch of his Viagra pills. And now he thinks he's got pointers. But you know, Buddy never bothered me. You know, they talked about Ron Swoboda earlier. Now, there was a real jerk. But Buddy never bothered me because I never understood what the hell he was saying anyway. But it's been fun coming back here. And I'm not going to say anything wonderful about you, Buddy, because I said I wasn't going to. But we had a little dinner last night, and hey, we're telling stories and jokes. Buddy's got his hand on my shoulders. Man, I felt like one of his close friends, you know. But it's fun being back and getting to know him and being with these guys. Thank you very much.
Because I'm gorgeous.
Mitsubishi.
Buddy, it's now time for this video, something we've waited for all night long, the life story of Buddy D, or The Lost Weekend. Let's go to the videotape.
His name, Bernard Saverio Diliberto, Jr. He was born in the city he's lived his entire life. Bernard Saverio Diliberto, Jr., but you know him as Buddy D. Graduated from Jesuit High School and then Loyola University with a degree in journalism. he joined the staff of the Times-Picayune in 1950. In 1966, just as a team named the Saints were awarded to the Crescent City, a broadcast career for Buddy D was born at WVUE-TV. So, how did a newspaperman end up on TV?
I got half Glory's side and talked to him for about 2 hours because at that time I was very, very uncertain of what I should do. And he convinced me that the right move was to get into the broadcast end of it. And I will say this, in that 2-hour conversation, if he had taken a different approach, I wouldn't have gotten into the broadcast field. So I really think that he was the one that gave me the push to say yes.
As the Saints and Buddy D's broadcast career matured, his career and the New Orleans Saints' paths have always seemed to run parallel and occasionally bumping into one another. But Buddy never underestimates the impact that the Saints have had on our community.
I lived through it, and I will say this. The New Orleans Saints were the single biggest factor why New Orleans in the mid-'60s got over some of the racial problems that were affecting other southern cities. And the reason was, just as things were starting to get hotter and hotter, all of a sudden the Saints arrived. And of course now you have the races being thrown together and they're rooting for the same thing.
Buddy earned a reputation as a reporter with dogged determination, honest and hardworking, and more than willing to call it like he saw it. A habit that ended up costing Buddy more than a few frequent flyer miles.
Fred Williams, who was a Meekum gopher, he called me and told me, and he says, "Hey, I got good news for you. You're off the plane again for life plus 10 years. And he said, the extra 10 is just in case you're the second Lazarus. He said, you're still off for 10 years if you come back to life after you die.
In 1991, Buddy made the move to radio, a career path he never really anticipated.
I didn't even know radio existed from a sports talk standpoint. And I can truthfully say that I had a guardian angel on my shoulder there.
Guardian angel, indeed. It's the rare sports journalist that gets to ply their trade in their own hometown for over 50 years.
I've been very fortunate because I'm a native and I've been able to stay in the same city, my city, make good money and doing what I want to do. So you've been blessed when that happens to you.
As down-to-earth as Buddy D is, he may have misconceived notions as to his own verbal dexterity?
Well, I think, generally speaking, I talk like a lot of people talk.
And Buddy D knows one of his legacies will certainly be his support for the hiring of Mike Ditka.
I know this, no matter what I think, that wherever I go, I'll always be associated with, you recommended Mike Ditka. In fact, I think that'll at least be a line on my tombstone.
Bernard Saverio Diliberto Jr., Buddy D, newspaper reporter, television sports anchor, radio personality, always finding a way to understate things.
Certain events in history, big events like the assassination of President Kennedy, most Americans know exactly where they were that day when they heard the news, that day when they realized that their president had been assassinated. Well, from a sports fan in New Orleans, I think most people always remember the day when they heard the incredulous news for the first time that Martin Anderson had been put on waivers.
And one thing's for sure, Buddy D's never at a loss for words.
Good evening and welcome again to Hey Buddy D. If you have small children in the house, you might not want them to see the next film that's going to be shown. It's sort of a football execution, and it has a way of eliciting vulgar language from the normal, everyday, hardworking people.
And what does Buddy D hope awaits him when he goes to that great stadium in the sky?
Well, probably, for sure, I'd be able to see all the NFL games at the same time, but most importantly, I probably would know who would win before I look at the game. So some kind of way, I'd have to get that down to my friends here and say, you know, take those 7 points and lay them.
Nice work. How about some of those shirts and sweaters, huh? Looked like they came out of the drapery department of the Ramada on Chef Mentour. Abdul has made himself into a cult figure by writing and singing parodies about the New Orleans Saints. Clearly, this man has too much time on his hands and no visible means of support. But he wanted to be here tonight because he didn't have anything else to do. Abdul, everybody.
Thank you, Jim. You know, these guys have spoken up here today as Buddy's peers and coaches and players that Buddy's been around. But I speak as a fan, someone who's been a huge fan of Buddy D for the last 100 years or so that he's been in New Orleans. And we just like to say from the fans, and I think I speak for all of them, Buddy, we thank you for everything that you did and everything that you're going to do for the city and for the Saints. And we know that your biggest nightmare is one day you'll have to report that Juan Sabota and Jim Jombrowski wrecked their Mitsubishi on their way to Rover Raj. This is a song that's on my second CD. This one's called Buddy Be Good, and this is one that we've done before for the crowds, and it just goes to show you what Buddy's done for us. And this one's called Buddy Be Good, and I hope you like it. Way down in Louisiana, down in New Orleans, there lives a sportscaster named Buddy D. He used to travel with the Saints players every game, till Big John Meekum kicked him off the plane. He never ever learned to really speak that well, still he gave him a job on WWL. Well, go! Go, Buddy, go, I say go. Go, Buddy, go, go, go. Go, Buddy, go, I say go. Go, Buddy, go, go, go. On WWL. Well, he has a little trouble saying players' names. He's glad we got McAllister, not Edgar and James. And even though commercials are a part of his job, they never should have gave him one for Rover Raj. And it doesn't take an advertising giant to see he really shouldn't do the spot for Mitsubishi. Well, go! Go, Buddy, go, I say go. Go, Buddy, go, go, go. Go, Buddy, go, I say go. Go, Buddy, go, I say go. On WWL. Well, then it happened one year, the Saints went 5-0, and all the squirrels were talking about the Super Bowl. And on the point after Buddy would profess, if they make it to the Super Bowl, I'll wear a dress. A regular dressmaker would not do. We need a tent maker, so they called Abdul. Well, go! Go, Buddy, go, I say go. Go, Buddy, go, go, go. Go, Buddy, go, I say go. Go, Buddy, go, go, go. On WWL. To you, Mr. Buddy D. From the fans, we love you.
Thank you, Abdul. Well, it's now time for Buddy to offer his rebuttal to all the true things that have been said about him up here tonight. Before he does, as a matter of courtesy, we're going to offer all the people in the first 3 rows your choice of an umbrella, a poncho, or a complimentary WWL rain suit. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor who has personally put WWL Radio on the national do not call list, Buddy D.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this so much. I brought my little TV to watch the Boston Yankee game while it was going on, and I haven't watched one pitch. So so I really like it. And all the guys that have been up here tonight, I have had associations with them, and down through the years, I know we didn't always see eye to eye on some things, but basically, I respected all of them. I've respected them very, very much. Coach Mora, the winningest coach in Saints history, lasted over 10 years, won 94 games. And I'll tell you what, if I wear a dress to go to the Super Bowl, I guarantee I'll wear a dress if there's another Saints coach that'll win 94 games and stay here over 10 years. That ain't going to happen. Now, with that said, you know, when Coach Mora was up here, he mentioned this. You know, Buddy used to think he could call plays. He said, man, can you imagine if Bobby Hebert's the quarterback and Buddy D's calling the plays? He said, who the hell would understand what's going on? Well, I'll put it to a vote. Would you rather that, or would you rather have Carl Smith send the plays? You know, Coach Mora always was, you know, very passionate about his job and everything. And when you're in the journalism business, you know, it's always natural to hope a good story falls your way, or hope a good soundbite falls your way. But a couple of the things that I had the best of all, man, I didn't get to use. And one of the stories I can tell you is that they were in Tampa, got the hell beat out of them, and Tampa wasn't good then. They were going to play the Washington Redskins, who were one of the best teams in the league, the next thing. So anyway, I put my microphone in front of Jim. He was the only one there at that particular time in part of his lock. I was the only one there. And I said, man, if y'all played this bad today, what in the hell is going to happen next week in Washington? Well, man, he got that red face, and he started, they better stop it. And man, I'm telling you what, it was a great piece of tape. They must have had about 15 cuss words every 45 seconds. And you know, so man, I'm looking at the cameraman, and when he finally shut up, I said, we don't even want to ask another question. You know, man, he had a great piece of tape. So I went to start doing some more interviews, and before we got out of the locker room, he came over to me and he said, look, he says, you know, I kind of went off the rocket a little bit. He says, I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't use that. I said, okay. And I understand, you know, the pressure of coaching, and you know, it was a legitimate request, and because you know, nobody else was there. I mean, when we did the interview, so we canned it. So we fast forward a couple of years, and this is at a practice. It's the last game of the season coming up, and the Saints are out of the playoff picture and everything, and they play in the Los Angeles Rams, if I remember. So anyway, it's at practice one day out at David Drive, and what Coach Mora used to do after practice, he'd come over toward the sidelines where the people in the media would meet him, radio, TV, newspaper. And this particular day, we're all there, everybody's shooting stuff, and Ron Sabota asked Coach Mora, he says, Coach, he says, how do you get your team up to play a meaningless game? Well, man, when I tell you, he went off like a rocket. I mean, literally like a rocket. The first thing he said was, Sabota, I figured it would be you to answer that question like that. And then he started, he said, in the NFL, he said, we don't play meaningless games. I don't know how many what you do with the National League with the match. And then he kept going. I mean, and boy, he was really mad. And, you know, the frustration of the season, understood that. Well, man, the minute he shut up, I signaled to the cameraman. I said, let's go, you know. So we get in the car. That was before they had satellite trucks. So we get in the car, and we drive, and I get on the car radio, and I said, man, listen. I said, we really got a good piece. I said, man, it's priceless. I said, in fact, I said, it's going to take a little while to edit. I said, so have your best editor there in the thing. And okay, I told him what it was and everything. So, man, we get to the station on Charter Street, and bingo, we're in there, and it's only about 25 minutes before the 5 o'clock show. So zing, they edited it all out in about a little bit over a minute piece. They had 14 bleeps in a little bit over a minute piece. But anyway, we're just about finishing it, and they come and say, Coach Mora's on the phone in your office. He wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I go in, and he said, buddy, he said, listen, he says, I kind of went off like I should have gone off this afternoon. And he said, I'd appreciate if you didn't use it. And I said, well, Coach, I said, unlike the last time, I mean, they had other people there. I said, all these other guys that got the same tape I got. And he said, well, I've already talked to Jim Henderson, and I've already talked to Ron Sabota. And both of them said they wouldn't use it if you didn't use it. So anyway, I thought about that, and okay, coach, we won't use it. So I went back and told the news director, and, he screamed and howled, you're stupid and blah, 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 blah. It was a long time later, and I tell you what, I give him credit. I give him credit. It was a long time later, I found out he didn't talk to Jim Henderson, and he didn't talk to Ron Sabota. Now that was smart. I agree with that. But anyway, Jim certainly, his record here, I know it kind of fell apart at the end, and the way it turned out, I wish he'd have stayed a little longer, because then my tombstone wouldn't have said he recommended Ditka. So anyway, again, as I said, the best coach that the New Orleans Saints have ever had, the most wins they've ever had, the longest tenure they've ever had, and I think it'll last many, many years, especially the way the game's played today. And so, and once you're off, I find out once the players and the coaches get out of the business, and it's not so much frustration that's going on, they're regular guys. They're good guys. Alec Gifford. I worked, I guess just about 25 years with Alec Gifford in the television business, and I'm certainly somebody that I really respected. And if you want to, at his age and everything, and he's still in the television business, and that is hard. Believe me, I don't know. There's rare exceptions. He's one of them. But generally speaking, the people who run television, and I understand why, because they told me this, that the public doesn't like to see somebody age, in the sense that if they're on television every day and everything like that, and hey, you're growing up with them as a kid, and then by the time you become an adult and everything, they're still on, and you don't look the same way, so they usually take them off the screen. Well, Alec Gifford has stayed all that time, so that speaks highly of him. Billy Kilmer was, the type of quarterback that, sort of like Bart Starr is, except not quite the passer Bart Starr is. But as far as the moxie and everything else, and he was a real competitor. And he was the source of some of the greatest stories, except he never got to use them. Because, man, when he'd tell them to you, he'd say, now, I'm going to tell you this, but on your word that you won't use it. So anyway, the 69 season ends. He comes back in the 70 season. Tom Pierce got fired. J.D. Roberts took over the team. He's back in the 70 season. The 70 season's a bad season. And they were going to draft Archie Manning in the next draft, so they were going to trade Kilmer. Now, he's telling me the story, and I had to swear I wouldn't tell it, but not tonight I can tell it. So the last game of the season was against the Chicago Bears, which were really a bad team, sort of like this team you saw Sunday. And that particular year, it was the first year of Walter Payton, but anyway, the team itself was a bad team. Yet they beat the Saints 24-3, and it wasn't even that close. So, man, the season's over. Everybody's, going to go drown the sours, and so, a lot of them ended up in the French Quarter. I know after I got to the show, a lot of times we used to go to a local hangout called the Chart Room in the Quarter. Big piano bar and everything. So I knew where it was and everything. So apparently what happened at that particular night, Kilmer and his date, Julianne Miller, who was the Meekum secretary, they go, and it's about midnight, and they sitting in the Chart Room, and they got a big post and everything there. And so everything's going fine, and all of a sudden, they hear the bartender, and you couldn't see it sitting behind the post. You'll hear the bartender say, "Hi, Mr. Meekum, how's things going?" So Meekum says, "Well, Happy, if I didn't have an alcoholic for a quarterback and a blankly blank for a secretary," he said, "it would be okay." Well, man, Kilmer heard it. He sprung around from the thing, started strangling Meekum on the bar. They pull him apart. The next day, and I'm getting all this from him, the next day, Meekum goes back to the organization and says, "Look, trade him, but here's the deal. I never want to hear from Billy Kilmer again." He said, "If ever I do anything I want to do in football, I never want to hear from Billy Kilmer again." He said, "Now, I don't care what they offer, and just put him someplace that you'll never hear from Billy Kilmer again." So with those orders, even though the San Francisco 49ers and New York Giants were offering several draft choices better than Washington was, they traded him to Washington to sit behind Sonny Jurgensen. So, man, you know, a couple of years later, Gilmer was the quarterback in the Super Bowl. So, you know, I mean, Meekum was so bad, even when he tried to bury somebody, he couldn't do it. Pete Finney, now we go back forever. You know, he's a little older than I am, but you can tell that. But a couple of stories on Peter. The day of Dempsey's kick, right after Detroit scored, Pete and Garnett, we both go toward the elevator to go down over to the Tulane locker room where the Saints were quartered. So, you know, because the game appears to be over and everything. So we're walking under the stadium, going around there, and then when you get to a certain point, you can either cut across the field or you can go, you know, all the way around outside the stadium and get to the Tulane locker room. When we get there, and I said, come on, Pete, let's cut across the field and, you know, see the last couple of plays. And he said, oh, hell no. Yeah. So anyway, we parted company. He went around to the thing, and I went out, and I happened to be standing in the corner of the end zone that Dempsey kicked for. So I saw Dempsey's kick. All right. Fast forward years later, Pete writes a column about the most 5 or 10 most exciting moments he's ever witnessed in sports. And the Tom Dempsey kick was one of them. So, man, I called him up. I said, man, you know, you really put me in a spot. I said, I'm going to have to expose you. You didn't see it, you know. And, you know, so you know, go way back with Pete Finney. One thing that, let me tell you what type of friend he is. I got kicked off the plane the first time. And now it's in the season. So, and what their intention was to try and put us at a competitive disadvantage. And really the only way you could get there were no satellite dishes then, the only way you could get the film back in time for the 10 o'clock show on Sunday night was to come on a Saints plane. So once they kicked me off, even though we were going commercial, unless it was a short trip like Atlanta or something, you never, and so the other competitors had the Sunday night thing. So that's how they were doing it. So boy, Pete came up to me and several other guys in the media came up and they said, man, you know, you're getting a bad rap. Can we do anything? I said, well, let me think about it. So I thought about it for a while and I said, you know what? I said, why don't we do this? I'll cover the game with the cameraman. We'll cover it. We'll do all interviews and everything. And then each week, each road game, we'll designate somebody, like Pete one week, Bob Rossler another week, Mary Foster from the AP another week, that I'd have an attaché case. And when I was finished it, I'd put the film in the attaché case and just leave it there in the locker room, and whoever was designated would pick it up and fly it back on the Saints plane. We flew the film back on the Saints plane the rest of the season. And they never did find out. So, man, finally, you know, I had to come clean. I said, man, how was this organization going to compete at the NFL level when they can't even find out that we're flying the film back on their own plane? But Pete really helped. Dave Dixon, you know, one thing about Dave Dixon, and this is my personal opinion, as I like to back it up, is that I don't know of one man who has contributed more to the city than Dave Dixon. The reasons. Number one, he was the catalyst to get the New Orleans Saints. He had some help from the politicians in Washington and everything, but he was the catalyst. He was the guy driving the train, so to speak. And boy, he would sort of promote 2 or 3 preseason games each year. Crowds would show up and everything. So, man, it went a couple of years. They were growing big crowds. The NFL was still, you know, tomorrow. So all of a sudden, the AFL, it starts, you know, rising up. So Dave says, you know, I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to start moseying with the AFL to see if it can get the NFL to come off the thing. So I said, man, that's a good idea, Dave. So he had an office in the Hibernia Bank building. And I had been in the office several times, and he's got, man, all kind of great NFL portrait, action show things all over the walls and everything like that, you know. And see, and one day, around this time, I went up to the office because I wanted to do a story on something he did. And all the walls had AFL things. And I said, geez, Dave, I said, you know, what's this? He said, well, Lamar Hunt's coming up today. And I said, well, man, you went to all that trouble because Lamar Hunt's coming? You know, it's not trouble. And he rolled the thing up, and then down came the NFL pictures. So he had revolving doors. I mean, revolving walls. He had revolving walls. Now, that was pretty smart. And man, not only did he get the Saints here, the Saints were the catalyst for the building of the Superdome. And you know what the Superdome has done for the Padres corridor and for the city as far as the buildings, and the Superdome has housed 9 Super Bowls, Pope's visits, national conventions, everything. And that was the man that really was the catalyst in getting all that. Bobby Hebert. You know, when I was kind of putting some of these stories together, I couldn't remember what you would kind of say a roast supply story to Bobby Hebert. So, you know, because, I mean, he was always a friend, he was always a good player, and he always was accommodating as far as interviews was, just like the story he told the year he sat out. But, you know, couldn't remember the type of story for him. So tonight, I heard one that I had never heard before, and I got it from his wife, Teresa. And she said that during the season he sat out, you know, he held out and didn't play that year. He said, man, you know, from time to time people would call him up in the season and say, man, come on back, Bobby, you know, they need you and stuff like that. So finally, one guy called up. He was the head of the Booster Club. And he said, Bobby, we want you to do something for us. I said, what? He said, we're starting a campaign. Everybody in New Orleans abstain from sex, and you included, until they get you back in the field. And of course, Bobby said, nah, it's a little strong. You know, pass on it. But the J.D. Roberts story, we're talking, Vince was telling a story about War Memorial Stadium. It was a little different, not too much different. That was the year that Archie Manning was you know, he was on the sidelines. He was with the Saints. J.D. Roberts is the coach, and it's the first year of O.J. Simpson with the Buffalo Bills. So, man, it's an exhibition game, but, man, Simpson, of course, was really an eye-opening player. So somewhere around the third quarter or something, Archie tells me the story. He said, man, he was standing next to J.D. on the sideline. And he said, you know, I don't know who that 32 is, but he's a hell of a player. So what I'm telling you, the guy's the coach of the Saints. He don't know who O.J. Simpson was. You know? The series on MASH, I used to enjoy that, you know. Well, for one reason, I was in Korea, and I saw a lot of things that were, you know, on the crazy side as far as the type of things in MASH. So I was there about 3 months, and I was attached to an Army unit, the 2nd Division, but I was working for Stars and Stripes. So, you know, I did stories, feature stories and things on this or that. So this particular time, they called from Tokyo, where Stars and Stripes was based, and said, listen, Lou Sharpie, who was working for Here It Now, it was the forerunner to 60 Minutes, and they coming over to do a piece with the frontline troops on the Eisenhower-Stevenson presidential election. You know, who they were going to vote for absentee. So anyway, they get up, and Stars and Stripes said, you go cover that and write a story about them doing that story. Okay? So, man, at that time, you know, I had never gotten close to what you would call a front, although it was a stable wall at that time. In other words, it wasn't more, you know, we take 5 miles, they take 5 miles. It was sort of, you know, everybody was in their one position, although, I mean, a lot of people were getting killed and things. So I go up there, and we go to a battalion headquarters, and they said, look, where can we go and talk to frontline troops and at the same time not get our equipment in any danger? Because, man, we got $50,000 in equipment. So he looks at the map and everything. He said, I tell you what, right here. He said, I got a heavy mortar platoon, and it's been online for a month, and they haven't had one enemy line in, one enemy round in. So we go up there, and I'm just along for the ride to observe everything. So I'm making notes. So we get up there, and as I said, this had turned at that time was a night war, so to speak. In the daytime, nothing happened. So, man, we get to the heavy mortar platoon. All the guys were out sunbathing, they're just laying around sunbathing and everything. So they go to talk to the commanding officer. The lieutenant was in command, and they told him what it was, the See It Now show with Edward R. Mora and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, man, they liked that. So the lieutenant said, look, he said, you want to get on TV, guys? He said, yeah, oh, great, get on TV. So, man, they all come, and for the next half hour, Shoppy did little bites with each, different soldiers, and they told them who they were going to vote for and why not, and just come up with humor. Some of it was serious. So now it's over. Now, I don't know anything about television yet. I mean, any background I had was newspaper. So when it was over, Lou Shoppy said to the lieutenant, he said, listen, he says, could we get some of you all, could you shoot some mortars? He said, but so I can do a stand-up. Now, I didn't even know what a stand-up was then. So anyway, they had all these guys standing around, and they had a big bunker and everything. So anyway, they called up to the forward observer, gave him some things to shoot the mortars, and they had to write something down what they're shooting at. They wasn't shooting at anything, but they had to write something down. All they were doing was making a boom, boom. So Lou Shoppy said, and from the front lines in Korea, boom, boom, boom. This is Lou Shoppy reporting. Well, man, sounded all right to me. Well, within 30 seconds or a minute, the Chinese dropped 3 mortars right in the middle of everybody. And they come up a valley, and, well, man, bingo. Something like 18 people were hit. But the most important thing is that the bunker was so well camouflaged that I had all these people standing around, and a minute later, I'm the only person there. In other words, because I can't find the entrance to the bunker. So, man, I run around the bunker about 3 times, and all of a sudden, a hand reaches out and pulls me into the bunker, see? So, man. So anyway, Lou Shoppy, he's got a big gash in his thigh and everything. I mean, he really had a bad wound. So, man, they're yelling for medics all over the place. Medic, medic, medic. I mean, I'm sitting there and just sort of nervous, and I'm looking at everything, And so I sort of felt I was starting to sweat, even though it was October and it was pretty cold. And I said, oh, so I opened my jacket, my fatigue jacket, and my whole undershirt is filled with blood. And I said, oh, my God. I'm hit, Well, man, Lou Shoppy sees that, and the medic gets there, and they said, go get him, go get him. He says, he's worse. I said, yeah, I'm worse, So anyway, so the medic comes in, he looks, and he feels the back and everything. He said, look, he says, you got a flesh wound. He said, but, nothing really serious. I mean, so, not life-threatening or anything like that, so just relax. I said, okay. So now, they had the little firefight going on, and that finished, and so now it was still going on. But anyway, to walk to an ambulance, and I was able to walk to an ambulance, you had to go over an open field about the size of a football field and a half. So it's got 2 guys right alongside of me in case, I was feeling bad or something. So we're walking, and all of a sudden, and they told me, they said, listen, if you hear any incoming rounds, hit the deck, okay? So, man, we ain't 10 feet, and all of a sudden, man, hit the deck. And they just standing there. And they look at me and said, that was outgoing. Outgoing, okay. So I get back up. Anyway, I must have hit the deck at least 6 times, and it was always outgoing. Because I had never, in my ear, I had never had experience with outgoing comes from ingoing. Well, as luck would have it, because you're supposed to do that, I did get... I had a flesh wound and ended up with a little piece of shrapnel in my stomach. Went to the Swedish Red Cross Hospital in Seoul, got it fixed and everything. I was out for about a month, and I went back to work. But here is the real story. since it was the Eisenhower-Stevenson election coming up, Eisenhower visited the troops in Korea. Now, Lou Sharpie had been the first civilian correspondent wounded in over 2 years. In other words, in the early part of the war, they had a lot of them wounded. But he had been the first civilian correspondent wounded in over 2 years. So the Army's always going to, play for a little publicity, and so did it. Man, we're going to get Ike to pin the Purple Heart on Lou Sharpie. Man, that's a great idea. So Lou Sharpie says, He says, the only way I'm going to do that is everybody else, they're around, and he said, Buddy was there with me. He said, So anyway, it come down to that. Here's Eisenhower pinning the Purple Cross on some real soldiers, and he's pinning the Purple Cross on me, and he didn't know the story. But it was one of those crazy things. One of those crazy things in life that happen, and you just hope that returns to good fortune. Everything worked out fine. Came back, started working for the town speaking union again, and hey, man, I think the most fortunate thing that's ever happened to me is that I've been able to live in the city I was born in all my life, work in the profession that I really wanted to work in and enjoy and have a passion for, and at the same time, make pretty good money. And so, when you can do that, you're really blessed. And I feel I've really been blessed. And tonight, believe me, it was special. And all of these guys that are up here tonight, I've associated with them in one way or another. And believe me, when I say from the bottom of my heart, I respect every one of them, some for their athletic ability, some for their coaching ability, and of course the guys in the media. So I almost can't describe the words how I feel tonight, because in a manner, I think New Orleans is a very different place than many cities. And so, man, if you can work in New Orleans, and a lot of, they were saying about how I talk every time, and that's true. I mean, that really happens. But the good thing about it is, you talk like a New Orleans guy. I mean, they understand what you're saying, so that there's really no problem. Now, I mean, if I was in Dubuque or some other places like that, man, they say, where'd this guy come from, One final note, I'd like to thank my wife, Peggy. She's been stand up, Peggy. She's been an inspiration, but one time she literally saved my life. We were on vacation over on the Gulf Coast, and we spent a few days there, and we came back. Richie Pettibone and his wife were on a trip with us, and it was a really hot day, and I'm unloading the luggage, because we had been there for a week. I'm unloading the luggage, bringing it up into the house and everything, and I started getting short of breath because I was unloading the luggage. And so she says, man, she said, you out of wind just for unloading the luggage? I said, yeah, but it's a hot day, man. She said, man, listen, she said, we ought to call our doctor, our regular doctor. So I said, oh, for God's sake, let me just rest. So she called Dr. McNulty, and he said, well, I'm here, come in. Now, I'm off. If I'm not off, nowhere in the world I'm going to go. So, didn't affect the day. So we go there, we meet with the doctor, and he said, well, I'm going to go downstairs and get a chest x-ray. And he says, I'll look at it and give you a call in a couple of days. Fine. So we go downstairs, get the chest x-ray and everything, and so now everything is finished, and we're getting ready to leave, and they said, wait, don't leave yet. We want the doctor to see and give it the okay. I said, okay. So we sit down for a minute, and all of a sudden, they say, the doctor wants to see you. I said, man, we go upstairs, and I've seen enough movies that, man, when they come out from behind the desk, and they pull up a chair for the wife, and they pull up a chair for you, I knew something was wrong. So anyway, he told me his office was right across the street from Touro Infirmary. He told me to go down to Touro Infirmary, and he was going to send a cardiologist down to meet me in the emergency room. And so anyway, I did that, and the cardiologist, kind of checked everything out, and And he said, you know, they start giving me pills. They start undressing me. They wanted to get me to intensive care right away, and I don't feel bad. I don't know what's going on. Man, one guy that's working feverishly to get my clothes off and get the nightgown or whatever it on, he said, man, buddy, don't worry. He said, it's going to be okay. He said, you know, I'm a Tulane guy, and he said, I've always liked you. You've always been very fair with Tulane. So, man, I'm saying to myself, Jesus, thank God I've been very fair with Tulane in that spot like that, see? So anyway, it ended up the next day I had a quadruple bypass, and believe me when I say to you, if she didn't say that day, and then it turned out that the doctor said that, you know, it was something that 4 or 5 days later you very likely would have died of a heart attack. So in that respect, one little kicker to that story, and the people in the media would love this, you had so much medication and so much stuff after the quadruple bypass that, you know, I was completely knocked out, and so I really wasn't coming to until the next morning, and I still, you know, I really wasn't coming to, but I could see people's face and different things like that. So I'm laying there, she's standing there. All of a sudden, the nurse brings me a phone. Now, I mean, you know, believe me, I'm almost incapacitated. She brings me a phone, and Peg is looking at that, and she says, well, what's that? She said, Bob Del Giorno wants to talk to you. I said, what? I mean, I didn't say anything. So, man, Peggy gets on the phone, and she says, what in the hell's going on? Anyway, what it was the doctor. So now you got to be nice to the doctor that did the operation. And what it was, Bob Del Giorno had called the doctor and asked if the doctor would do an interview about, you know, what happened and where it was the sex. Well, man, the funny thing is, he was asking permission to go on the Bob Del Giorno show and tell him, you know. And I said, yeah, but boy, you talk about one mad wife. She said, man, I can't believe that happened like that, but it did. You know, you're just coming out, and they all got the phone to you to try and get you on radio. Folks, thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart, and I hope I stay another 10 years or so in this business, and I do believe this. I hope it turns out differently, but I think that when I die, and many of us at this table die, that Jim Mora's 94 victories and 10 seasons will still be St. Records. Thank you.
Incidentally, a copy of Buddy's remarks translated into English is available through Merkel Press for $5. We have just a couple real quick things to do. First of all, we have a commemorative thing behind me for Buddy. Tuna. You guys know Tuna, one of the greatest artists in New Orleans. Show him your work. Thank you, Tuna. Thanks to all the roasters. Thanks to Buddy. Thanks for enduring a long evening and being such a great part of it. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and have a very safe trip home. Good night.
There's only one home for the legendary voice of Louisiana broadcasters Hall of Famer Buddy D. It's not as the highlight guy at NFL Films.
Aaron Brooks passed the Saints to victory with an 87-yard touchdown to Dante Stolpepper.
Not as the spokesperson for an electronics store.
Man, look at this brand new shiny Mitsubishi.
But as a voice for the fans on the voice of the Gulf South.
WWL.
The home for sports talk with Buddy D. Weeknights on WWL 870 AM.